Hi everyone, I'm Zach and I like movies, and it's time for another entry in my Letterboxd Criterion Challenge of 2024. And today's prompt is number 30, which was pick a movie from Charlie Day's Closet Picks video. And he picked up the John Cassavetes fine film set, and I chose out of that his 1958 directorial debut, Shadows. And this is, like I said, the directorial debut of the writer, the director, and acting like godfather of American independent cinema, John Cassavetes. And I think it's really no exaggeration to say that many, if not every director working today owes a massive debt to John Cassavetes in some capacity or another. And Shadows is interesting. I think fully appreciating Shadows as a film, you kind of need to like better understand film history and where filmmaking was at the time that it came out, because this was a like one of, if not the first, independent movies like ever made. You know, this was and how it came about is actually interesting too, because by the end of the 1950s, Cassavetes was working, pretty regularly, making appearances in TV shows and some movies. Like he worked on like The Dirty Dozen and stuff. But by the late 50s, he also had his own acting classes that he was teaching, and he was very. And I might have said this in my Woman Under the Influence video, but Cassavetes wound up being he was very skeptical about the method, the method acting that was being popularized by Marlon Brando and like being pioneered by like works of like Stanislavski and Stella Adler at the time. That he found very self-aggrandizing and sort of like it felt more like kind of thing where it's like more personal therapy than acting. He was ahead of the curve in disliking method acting as well. Oh, another trailblazer credit to his name. But it was in these acting workshops that he was running with his various classmates that that a particular exercise that they worked through kind of became the foundation of Shadows. Where a black woman who passes for white dates a white guy who winds up being repulsed when he finds out that she has a darker skinned black brother with her. And that's kind of like the main core of the romance angle in Shadows. Because what Shadows essentially is, in like a plot sense, I say, and I'm sort of using plot sense in quotations there, because Shadows is rough is the operative word to describe this movie, and you kind of have to cut it some slack. It has a wandering, the narrative kind of wanders in and out of a romance and just kind of another lead character who's like just running around with friends trying to pick up ladies. The visuals are very just rough. They were shooting a lot on location without a permit. It was very pack up and go whenever you could. But the audio quality is here or there. Sometimes you have to really like lean in and try to hear what they're saying if you don't have the subtitles on. And oftentimes there'll even be like clear shots where one take is clearly like shot separately, like it looks like a reshoot in comparison to like the master that you were like using in the scene properly. And it's, again, you do kind of have to cut it some slack. This is the kind of micro budget filmmaking that I lovingly refer to as $20 in a dream. It's just scrounging up however much money you can, shooting at your home, shooting with friends and workmates and all that. And this was really kind of the first of its kind, and especially in America, because especially at the time too. This was like shot in 1957. A lot of it in New York and around it is very much sort of the time in some of the casting, like you have like you have like two white actors playing playing African American characters, but you also have and you also have darker skinned black actors who are playing these play these other important characters with more fleshed out emotional dimensions, which at the time was uncommon, I'll say. And you also have, it's also very much set of its location and its period. It's very much in sort of like around the the beat poetry area of New York in the late 50s and this was so, the way that it was so radical was that all movies was like really beholden and really made through the studio system and like very adherent to the Hays Code and like Tubi kind of gotta cut Cassavetes some slack for the casting here, because like interracial relationships was borderline illegal, but honestly, as far as like this plot goes, there's not much a focus on the miscegenation angle. There is, so much as there is like the emotions present in the main girl Lelia, and I do sort of struggle in sort of expressing how much I enjoyed this movie, because this is kind of one of those movies that I respect and admire more than I like. You know what I mean? Because I feel like Shadows is kind of essential viewing in a historical in like more of a historical film context, because like this really does show the foundations of not just what Cassavetes would go on to do in other movies like Faces and Opening Night, or even even in his more mainstream stuff like Gloria, but also really showing how independent cinema would like not just sort of came to be. Like, yeah, he even preceded the French New Wave by a couple of years. Like, this was like came out like about like a little bit earlier than Godard's Breathless, which and I also would say that there is something to appreciate about its more rough around the edges ness. In fact, a lot of the filmmaking inexperience kind of becomes part of the character. It really does, and it really does feel like kind of a movie that like you watch and say, well, I can do something like this too, because they were just like getting like the only people who had any experience from film was Cassavetes himself and the cameraman, and everyone else is just kind of like following through, and like it feels very improv. And it even says as much at the end, where it says this film was an improvisation as the credits play, and it's really it does you do see where inspiration sort of birthed onto other filmmakers. Like I think if you paired this with a very, very early Martin Scorsese movie called Who's That Knocking on My Door, you can kind of see a lot of where the building blocks came from. And I think seeing those building blocks and knowing what they are in the context of a filmmaker's general oeuvre, I think is very essential, because I feel essential, even if they're not like always great. I feel like knowing the first movie and where they started and what they built off of and what they learned from their first movies, I think is very important. I feel like if you want to know Spielberg at his best in like Raiders and even his great work in the early 2000s, I feel like, and even recently with like West Side Story, I feel like knowing, like going back and watching like Duel and some of his early short films is kind of essential. I feel, and I feel like when you watch movies like Shadows, and when you even read up in Shadows, like they have a wonderful write-up in here, both from Cassavetes, and who was one of the brothers, Gary Giddens. There is a wonderful. You really do get You really do get a better appreciation about filmmaking, and I feel like even if I might not return to Shadows all that often, there is a lot that I can, and a lot that I do admire it for. I feel like even if there is this, and I feel like the spirit of what Shadows represents and what Shadows brought to other people, like it did bring to the likes of Martin Scorsese and Peter Bogdanovich. It even to independent filmmakers today. Like, you can even see some elements of Shadows in like Blair Witch Project, where it's just like a bunch of people wandering around the woods with a movie camera and finding a movie out of that. And like, even today, like, I'm recording this video on my phone, and anyone can make a film, and anyone can make a film like that. Like, Sean Baker made Tangerine shooting on an iPhone, and it looked amazing. And yeah, I think I think anyone from like Sean Baker to Martin Scorsese, they all owe a debt to Cassavetes. And on top of Cassavetes, I think there's a wonderful passage here in this introduction from the booklet that I think is very, very essential, especially now, given that movies are still so dominated by big corporate monopolies, and about the studios that have become just way bigger monopolies on film. I think what he says here in his closing remarks about what's wrong with Hollywood is very pertinent to now, and I do want to just read this. Full credit to Cassavetes and everyone who worked on this, not just this booklet, but also this wonderful restoration. It still keeps a lot of the roughness, keeps a lot of its character in there too. But what Cassavetes says here: without individual creative expression, we are left with a medium of irrelevant fantasies that can add nothing but slim diversion to an already diversified world. The answer cannot be left in the hands of the money men, for their desire to accumulate material success is probably the reason they entered into filmmaking in the first place. The answer must come from the artist himself. He must become aware that the fault is his own, that art and the respect due to vocation as an artist are his own responsibility. He must therefore make the producer realize, by whatever means at his disposal, that only by allowing the artist full and free creative expression will the art and the business of motion pictures survive. And that, I think, is as good a note to end on. And full thanks to Cassavetes and all that he's inspired. And I can't wait to dig through more of these. I still haven't seen Opening Night or Killing of a Chinese Bookie, at least, and that's just in this box. There's also Husbands, there's also Gloria, there's also Love Streams. He's one of the titans for a reason. And yeah, I think that'll do it for Shadows. Not a kind of a rough movie, kind of not a lot of movie to talk about the movie itself, more like the history it is, and the sort of what the small stepping stone that it was in a much larger world of that became independent cinema. And yeah, big thanks to the god John Cassavetes. And that'll be it for me. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe. Hope you also watch John Cassavetes movies, including everything else in here. And I think that'll be it. And I'm Zach. I have a lot more movies to watch, and I hope you watch movies too. And I will see you all later.